Welcome to the channel. This is Reliable Rudy. I was having some technical difficulties with OBS, so I hope everything is set up reasonably. It looks like it's last week's title. To update that, just one title name, ATHM. Nothing's changed. We like the long for this name. Whether you're looking at it from a financial perspective, a charting perspective, a strength perspective, a volume perspective. Uh, we like the way that this is setting up with a small gap up, trying to hold this 30s. But before we go into any more charting and stock market and trading and investing, you guys know I'm not a licensed financial advisor. Everything in this live stream is me simply sharing my opinion, nothing more, nothing less. I'm just a guy doing what he loves to do. I'm gonna make mistakes, but we're gonna do our best to learn from them and move forward and try and be better the next time. It's all about getting better every single day, and that's what we're gonna try to do. With that being said, we'll go into the ATHM. We can see that we get the gap up, retraces down. Originally had gap fill buying right off this gap, and now trying to give up the ghost a little bit. One thing that is a little bit alarming, as you can see, the lower highs. So is this going to have the strength to kind of push that and discredit that? Where we talked last week, where if this gets over 31, it'll be interesting to see how much strength that push has. Whether it is going to be looked at as a retracement up into this right in front of 32s, or whether it has the strength to kind of push this flat top that's built, which can be dragged over a little bit further and even a little bit further to the left. So that is around that 33 half break. We go look at the daily chart, and you can see that has been the resistance that it has struggled with, whether you have to put it a little bit higher. But another thing is it hasn't been able to fill this 34.50 gap. So what type of reaction are we going to get off of that? Where if we are able to solidify any price action above there, we're going to be looking for a further extension and potentially a trend change. You can see that even looking over here, we've still been kind of just setting lower highs all the way through. So if we were to get some price action that moved to these upper 30s, how much continuation is going to jump onto that boat for a move higher? INVAX trade that we're still sitting in. We adjusted the trend line a little bit today. We are on candle number 3. Here's your first bull flag. 1, 2, 3 holds the level. Put the stop in. The longs protect the stop. We get that continued move higher up to the more solidified resistance area. And now we're getting 1, 2, 3 on, a little bit of increased volume on this first pullback candle, but you can see it pulled in pretty aggressively, and you can see the wick of buying coming in there. So how much buying and selling took place, and then you can see still a little bit of increased volume, but it is decreasing day over day. But you can see the amount of selling pressure that came in when this was a full green engulfing candle. We were watching it sort of reject those 75s, and it came in quite aggressive. You can see this move to the downside. Here is your test step into it, rejects, and as soon as it discredits this sort of move, as soon as it really takes out this low, it tries to hold, but you can see the selling pressure just forces it down. We close around that 9 level, and boom. And maybe that initial selling pressure kind of shows you the picture for a potential downtrend and a potential channel to the downside. We have our adjusted trend line just leaving that wick inside of there. We're trying to trade inside the range, but if we're just mapping out these lows over here, this is what it kind of showed rejection of in this first candle. It tried to push up. It actually was back over 80 or 75s, and it closed below it. And you can see it tried to make a secondary push on the next candle, and also traded down. Well, now we're back in this range. Can we show some rejection of here and then set some sort of higher low? I'd like for it, 8 minutes left in this candle, I'd like for it to set some sort of a close extended, at least higher than the previous candle. That way, if an 850 hold does come in, maybe there's a catalyst to at least try the downtrend. End phase, I'd say end phase off the open was a very interesting little setup. You have a neckline break and you have a gap fill that I was able to close above. So we actually did put orders in off of this 123 flat that got triggered and initially caught a bid. Maybe we can go take a look at that. Initially caught a bid. Here's your close. It initially caught a bid right off of 23s, but then it gave it up and kind of gave up the gap up price. We were debating whether we wanted to put one off this gap. You can see as it got close, which is sort of a flat top that it was setting, that gapped over, retraced all the ways back down into that range. Is it worth something of trying? I would say you're going to have some definite pressure off of these 122s, which has started the gap, sort of. But I would say end phase was significant. Coming into the day, I just said that I want to see it fill this gap sometime today. It originally was going to gap up to like these 121s, which was below that neckline. Maybe tried to add a little bit too early in the day, early in the week. It's a Monday. But I like the ad that we had, and I'm not really worried about uh, getting the perfect entry. It's just about respecting the levels when they kind of come into play. And I felt that this 123 sort of justified that if it can hold a close above that gap, that we try and put orders in on top of that for a continued move. And another thing that I liked about the move off the open is that it was able to get over top of these 122s, which last time uh, we held restraint. We had it set up just like this because it was wicking up towards that, and it showed a push through. But we said we wanted to see this gap get filled, and maybe we can think about action off that 122. Well, we never got that until today. So that was uh, just a small ad. It wasn't anything crazy. I don't know what our average coming into the day was 137s. So that's right around this range, but the averages in that we've had in this price action in the 120s actually lowered our average from 160s plus or minus somewhere in there. I believe 164 for full disclosure. But to lower that average down to 137s, we're just playing this accordingly. If we get price action down into these teens, we're not going to shy away from sticking to this name and actually getting the true size that we want on this name. I would say we're not in a position where we have the size that we want on the name yet, but over the course of this weakness right here, whether this has to come back into that oversold, we are going to continue adding to this name. BAC, look at where the gap up came to. We've talked about 28 flat. We've talked about 28.50. We've talked about 29s. Look at where we gap up to, right up to those 28.50s. Trying to put some strength in. Warner Brothers and Disney, a little bit of strength on the day, so maybe those media names. We can see Warner Brothers a nice churn to the upside. From where we really started our position off 13s, we felt it was a reasonable ad, and then respecting down to those 1250s, we felt 1250s was a reasonable area, and then kind of gave it up the ghost. I'm not as worried long term. I would say I'm more worried about retracing up into these previous lows, which it tried holding 12 multiple times. If I were looking at something for today, I would say Baba off of this trend line looks very enticing. Setting up the sort of neckline break. So if this price action were to ever get over 96, I would say that is a very solidified confirm of this uptrend, and it's worth noting because we are continuing to play this ATHM where if Baba were to give up some strength, maybe that is a catalyst for this to potentially break this uptrend. But if it's able to hold this uptrend, I'm already going to be interested. We're getting a reclaim a positive, which it's done a couple times now, and it seems like continues to just reject this sort of strange looking trend line or downtrend right here. But nonetheless, I believe I will be very intrigued if this price comes into these middle 29s to continue adding to this position. I know there was opportunities that we didn't take when we're trading down here off of this trend line, in particular Thursday and also Friday, as it kind of gapped down and tested down to that 29 flat again. We were very interested in adding more, which would average us up. But moving along, I'd say oil is worth keeping an eye on. You can see it's continuing the sort of trade sideways, which is, I would say, pretty bullish for continuation. Uh, from the pullback, you just mark the previous high, which I mean, I'd say is very easy to just map out this high right here, which comes in around an 86 flat. It had a catalyst for giving some sort of wave pattern. It even was rejecting 87s, and it was setting up like, hey, we're gonna break down and try to trade down to this previous high. But the buyer is continuing to hold this and trade it sideways. I'd say this is a really bullish setup. Looking at the 15-minute, yes, it tested up there, and yes, it has increased red volume, but I mean, I wouldn't look at this as any type of 702 anymore. You can see the boom 702, give up the low, reject the low, trade down lower. This is where, if this was going to continue to stair step down, 86s would have gave up, in my opinion. But now that we've put 2 times wicks up to these 87s and tried to break over 87 or 88, excuse me, I would say uh, this is a ticking time bomb ready to kind of break these 88s. And when you do break 88, if it does, of course, I would say you have some clear extension points. You know, testing up to 90 is probably a start. You can see wick, 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 wick into those 90s. But I mean, as it solidifies 90s, I think middle 90s is not out of the question short term, where maybe we trade in this in between our 382 and our half for a little while. But if it continues to give this stair step type of look, you can look for false breaks underneath of that 382 that come into this 85 top. Uh, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see oil printing in these triple digits before you know it, where this is probably going to be the first areas that we look to trim down some of the oil plays. Obviously, relative to the oil play in particular, whether we're talking about XLE, MRO, whether we're talking about Devon, whether we're talking about ExxonMobil, whether we're talking about Silica, whether we're talking about Dino, whether we're talking about what other, you know, when you stop worrying about the position, you just let it kind of work. You kind of forget which oil plays that you're even in. Uh, the Diamondback. I mean, we have a good variety of different oils scattered across the United States where we feel comfortable with oil continuing the churn. And of course, XLE is a oil fund, so adding some broad exposure to some United States oil. But I would say it is playing the course accordingly to the point where it looks pretty good in my opinion. um, Looking around, I'd say DFS uh, just just barely. it doesn't get to that 75 order that we've had in, and I'm a little depressed to see this holding 90s. Not that I think it's going to keep going up, but if it does get over 92s, I think that would be a very bullish type of move for the play, just because over 92s is going to solidify you for potentially discrediting a descending channel that it kind of has going for it right now. But this is another name that I'd say your value to me is clear. It's clear that this is a value name. Even when you add in some of the sort of bad headlines with the name, whether you're talking about a pause in your buybacks, whether you're talking about the CEO departure, whether you're talking about the false charges from 2007 on certain accounts, whether you're talking about the banking sector, because they do have a banking sector, whether you're talking, there is more bad news. So, I mean, uh, there is a lot of answers that need to be kind of resolved, of course, with the name. But that is why we think we're able to get shares off this 90, and I would expect some sort of rejection. But I I think there's some clear levels that you can attempt to go off of. Whether this gets down to the low 80s or not, I think it has very good support that it can potentially hold off of these low 80s if it wants to follow this descending channel. So we haven't really added much more to the position. I'm actually expecting the price to go lower, but in long-term investments, sometimes that's what you're kind of looking for, is to buy them cheaper. Invos, we can look around. This is actually candle number 4, leaving a shaved bottom, but wicking into this level. You can see clear selling pressure up there. So not the most ideal setup for a pullback, but you can see the descending wedge pattern that's taking place. And realistically, I'd say these 25s held like a glove. That's marking 25 flat right there. So if it does break down 25s, I'd expect some downward pressure. But how does it act when we retest this 22 to 20 area? Geo acting like it wants to take out the lows that tried to set. Uh, but you can see the holds of 7. So until this really cracks down 7, I don't think there is really anything different that we can do with this position. I would say it's not an area that I'd want to add. But if you do add around these 7 areas and you do get that 750 break, I think there's some uh, a clear setup for this to be some sort of retracement. And if it is a retracement, uh, honestly, if it discredits the retracement and were to break over 1250, I think this is and actually setting up reasonable for some of these extension points where your top extension is not out of the question, but I'd say that is a little extreme. But looking at the weekly, uh, I just not sure if this is ready to go yet, but you can see uh, it also has some potential for, if it does have a leg down, I think you're going to come on in to this trend line potentially. Mr. Charles, good to see you. Morning, getting my coffee. Good to have you tuned in. Pretty boring morning. We're kind of just evaluating the market right now. It's a Monday. It's a little slow. We went over the title name, I don't know how many times now. But ATHM continuing to be the title name that we really talk about. Looking at the 15-minute, trying to hold these 30s, but I'm expecting a sort of breakdown of 30s, and I'm probably going to be on the bid for this neckline, trend line protection. Looking at the daily, you can see that's kind of where our levels are at. MSOM We're not opposed of trimming more, but we already respected this in front of these nines. A lot of these cannabis plays are strong names, and I'm looking for this to show some continuation where we'll probably just play this every whole dollar, but 10 I would say has some wick wick wick. Tries to hold this shelf, gives it up, has no retest. We kind of said the same thing about this 9 level, which didn't try the hold, but it broke it down and retested it before it broke down. But MSOS does look strong. We look at the 15 minute. It's flirting with this high, kind of a washout top coming in. End phase, retraced all the ways back down to the gap. We did buy 120. We did buy 123s today, so maybe not the greatest look off of your 15, but uh, over top of that neckline with a nice green candle closed above this gap. I really just wanted to put the order in and go from there. But obviously not enough buying pressure off those 123s, so not quite ready to go yet. But flirting, a candle that's flirted with it. We're going to continue respecting this name as it wants to kind of just trade sideways. I don't know what just happened right there. But ultimately, if this is able to show some sort of breakdown into these middle teens, that is going to be an area that we are looking to add. And we will be more than okay if it gets down there. We've sized accordingly, and we're going to continue to size into the position when we feel it's necessary. Intel, a strong name. We've had no outs on the name. We've had some outs on this little move up, and now just kind of held the position for strength, and even held it against strength for us on this little double bottom move. We were actually looking to reload if this sort of channel came into play, but didn't get that. But if this does want to push up for another leg up, this is going to be where we're looking for some trims. It does have a gap meeting in around a 40 flat level, and you can see the support that it tried to hold around here in these low 40s. So that is going to be our next sort of trim levels if that comes into play. Baba, trading closer to this trend line. Probably not a perfectly set trend line, and probably not going to discredit the trend line until a break of 86 halves. If the 86 halves come in, I would expect this sort of wave pattern to continue. You can see the retracement up. I would look at this sort of neckline as rejecting the low, trading back down, boom, right down to this 83, 84 level, where I'd expect some sort of pop up to this previous low, and then maybe even an extensive move down to these 80, which is a reasonable support level. But being off that trend line, it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Where is 80s even going to hold? If 80s do crack down, I would not be surprised to see this give some sort of test down all the ways to these lows again. Where I would be very interested in a continued long-term position for the name. I think the value's very clear. I think the news surrounding it is a CEO departure in the cloud business. Okay. One thing I am clear of is that the last 2 quarters, their average shares bought back is in around these upper 80s. So I would be inclined to say that the company is going to continue buying back shares here. How much is executed in that buyback? I don't know. Last quarter was 3.1 billion with 16.3 billion left. So I would say that they're chipping away in a strategic manner. They're not just unloading everything all at once. That started from a 25 billion, but looking at the cash position of Bob, I wouldn't be surprised to see continued increase in buybacks when they're trading around a 20 PE for a very well-run company, in my opinion. Obviously, there's political risk, so size accordingly. Do your own due diligence, of course, but I think this is a reasonable long. If this ends up breaking these 96s, I think this is going to be the start of a neckline, which could honestly catch a bid for a 100 break over 102. I don't see why. There's not really much here. Maybe a little bit off this 105 that it might struggle with temporarily. But as long as this trend line holds, I wouldn't be surprised to see this kind of play the course where 117, all it would take is a 100 hold, and I wouldn't be surprised to see top end of the channel. You have a catalyst for the gap up here at these 165s, which would be an extraordinary move. So I'm not going to just sit here and say, yeah, this is the bottom's in, and we're going to be straight shoot to 80%. No, uh, I would just say that if you're looking for some getting fair value for capital, uh, I would be inclined to think that this trend line is a reasonable add. And if you get a crack of that trend line, maybe just be patient. Just sit on your position. It's tough to say. Time will tell. We'll see what this 15-minute looks like. We can clear everything. And you can see giving out the lows is not a really bullish. And trying to give some sort of a cone, but not necessarily. If this would have showed any types of wicks, like up to 90 half, up to 91, maybe that could be a catalyst for some sort of trend reversal off of a big gap down. But is this, I would say, I wouldn't count this out until it takes out 87s. If it takes out 87s or maybe 86 half, give it a little bit of size to the downside. If it does give, this is just one scenario where it gives you a discredit of the trend line, where you have this trend line and you trade down to this gap and you see a large gap up that tries to push you back over 90s, I would say that is a possibility to fake out on on this wave pattern. And it might need to retrace up, reject, and set some sort of higher low. But then that neckline break, I think it would be a move over in Hong Kong markets or potentially the pre-market where you're going to see a large gap up, back up above this trend line. So even if it cracks this trend line, I'm going to leave it there because I've seen scenarios like this where it has a gap fill protection. It fills that, kind of gives you a sideways consolidation, then gives you a large gap up back in front of that trend line. I think it's reasonable. So even if this gives up this trend line, it's not going to be Armageddon where, oh yeah, get out of everything that you have. To me, that's not how I'm going to be playing it. To some people, maybe that is the right play. But we'll see how that position ends up playing out. Looking at some top movers for today, CGC. I mean, this is the most depressing sort of look for me, and Drift is here, so he will be able to testify, but missing fills, missing our alert, our tenths, I mean absolute tenths of a penny, where we had alerts right underneath of this. That is the exact spot. We had an alert, where if we got alerted, we were thinking about this gap right off this trend line. So I'm sure you're going to have some traders out there that are like, oh my gosh, look at this move I got on CGC. Well, old Rudy over here was freaking tenths of a penny from getting into this name near the exact bottom, where I can't believe I didn't even originally on the day, on this first candle, this is the opening candle of the day. You see it goes from Tuesday to Wednesday. We originally had, it was supposed to gap up to like 41 half. It was supposed to gap up to 41 half. We had an alert right on that 41. And instead of adding a second alert for the name, we moved the 41 alert right there. When we seen this first candle wick, we said, hey, if this alerts us further to the downside, we're going to try it. And before we knew it, we looked back up and the price was already back up here because we didn't have that 41 alert in anymore, which is It's so depressing looking at this, and we simply said, no, I'm not going to try it when I literally was so close to getting it right here. I can't bring myself to, maybe that's where I can learn from, where if I have something that I'm looking at that, has a reasonable type of chart setup, sucks. It sucks. Invex, kind of what we talked about. This candle actually closing above these lows is a little bit of a bullish sign. Still light volume on this 3 candle move, so I'm not going to say that, yep, 3 candles, they all look great, this is going to be a bull flag. I would say you're still trading inside of this descending channel. For some confirmation, you can see this first pullback right in the 950 sets this sort of double top where it continues that move down. If this were to reclaim 950s, we will be thinking, hey, this is candle number 3 off of here's your first bull flag, holds the level, stop, holds, makes another move right up to your resistance level, and now 1, 2, 3, where it was giving you the stair step look off of this red engulfing candle. I gotta go get my dog. I'll be right back. And we are back. I left my dog outside for like 30 minutes. It's okay, puppy. Yeah, good boy. Yeah, you're a good dog. Where was that? We were actually looking at Mullen this morning. I'm not surprised to see it. We said over top of these 45s, depending on how it traded today, I thought that it was actually going to look like a short. So anytime you're thinking of something being a short, my bad. Anytime looking at something that's short, it's like, okay, what would happen where this would discredit my short idea? And I said over 45 would be discredit enough. It comes right back in the reclaim right above this level, boom, and now showing a little bit of continuation, trying to show some volume increase on the initial sort of breakout, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Mullen try to catch a bid, but not something I'm going to try right now. TNGX, good little teaching moment off of TGNX where we stopped these 692s. I think 690 was the stop. Stop the low. It sucks. We just haven't had enough experience trading these sideways consolidation names personally, where realistically looking back, I would have looked at this 75 level as a stop. Would have had plenty of cushion, and we'd still be sitting in now, flirting uh, with the resistance level, trading back on in light volume, but these 2 pullback candles are very light, very light. 9 minutes left in this candle. If it stays light and shows just a little wick, I wouldn't be surprised to see this catch a bid off of these sort of tops right here, which is pretty much right there. So TGNX, not a half bad look. Looking elsewhere, let's try and find another move. Palantir, we said we were with Hal, and I was very intrigued in taking this trade. As I seen it start to turn green, we started putting it on the map at this 52s, and we said, hey, it's got a reasonable flat top. And you can see it breaks it in this continuation candle, which ends up being a continuation candle, catches some buyers right off that flat top. Would have been a reasonable trade to push this for the flat top, where over top of that flat top, you could honestly look at that as a sort of neckline channel where you can respect it and keep respecting it. So that's top end of the channel here is actually another 4 or 5%. But from the flat top break where we could have played it, a reasonable trade setup where, it might end up even breaking higher above that. But Palantir actually a reasonable look, and I would say I don't like the name long term. I think it trades rich, but that doesn't mean that it can't uh, continue to grow at a healthy clip, and buyers are very interested in this name, obviously. But you can see the sort of channel that it was setting up. In this candle in particular, it gives you a good look. Because you can see the volume increase, definitely more buying than selling, but I mean, it solidifies this sort of channel look as it buys it up really quick. But a decent look, and honestly, that 15.5 was your level and your wick high from Wednesday and Friday. So you can see the flat top correlating to the daily chart. That's also a good sign. And I'm not surprised to see it catching a bid. I would say this flat top gap is the next little stop area that it has. Fisker. Fisker, we would have been interested in Fisker. We marked it down to the 6 level, where if this pulled back in the 6 today, I think we would have tried it. Uh, but breaking that downtrend, uh, nice hold. You can see the catalyst for your sort of ascending channel. But we'll be on watch for the week, and maybe should even just have some alerts in for some sort of pullback into like 620, even the gap up today. 625 is where it gaps up from. I think Fisker is a reasonable long setup. You got positive strength on a clean positive break, but on the positive break, you actually push a downtrend as well. So that's a pretty interesting look in my opinion. End phase, indecision candle at its finest. It retraces pretty much right down to that gap. Doesn't quite get there, but you can see you sort of retrace. If it can just hold this level above this gap, this wick top potentially setting up for a neckline where if it pulls back down and then reclaims it, which is called a 2250, this could see this take out today's high. ATHM still holding a slight green candle right at the gap, so it gaps up, fills the gap, and now just trading sideways. If it breaks down, we're buyers off 2950s and buyers off the trend line. We're going to keep continuing to respect this name. Invos, continuing the trade in this wedge pattern. If it's able to take out this, we could honestly set an alert. This is where we got stopped out at. So I mean, we're not opposed of entering back in, but let's put that on that 29 break, slightly above it, and we can watch that live if that comes on into play. DVN, Bob was trying to hold these. Given the red engulfing kind of stair step look, is it gonna be anything worth a try? Like I said, I mean, if I was somebody that didn't have a position, I would be very intrigued on building that long-term position. Whether you add here and it boom flushes on you instantly, I would say I'd be shocked if over the course of 5-10 years this didn't give you a healthy return. I would be shocked. So that's how we're playing it. We're looking at it as in, I wouldn't be surprised over the course of a 5-year investment for this to average you like, I'm not going to just spitball a random number, but we'll just say a healthy return that has enough reason to believe that it could beat the market. Which I know everyone is just full of themselves and they're like, oh, you don't beat the market? Very few percentage of people beat the market. So for those conversations, I would say I would bet on the market over anybody that just looked at me face to face and was trying to build a long-term portfolio, you gave him X amount of capital, and when he bought into something, he was not able to sell it, or he was able to trim, but he had to hold a portion of that portfolio, I would bet the market every time. Every time. But that doesn't mean that you can't beat the market. It's just like years like 2022 for individual stock pickers. The Nasdaq greatly outperformed individual stock pickers, and it lost 40%. Just saying. I would say a majority of people were actually out of the money, probably 50%. I have no data that backs that up. But I would say for those that think that it's just easy to beat the market, uh, I just laugh at that. But looking at some of these other moves, while we're on the Nasdaq, I would say that the Nasdaq trying to hold positive strength, it gives a slight gap up. So anytime I'm dealing with the gap up, how does it act if it retraces back down to the gap? Is there some sort of catalyst that would tell us that, hey, this can retrace down to the gap? And there sure is. Anytime I see this first candle takes out the low, I'm instantly thinking, hey, uh, what are we rejecting? We're rejecting the very first candle. Boom. No close. You have a washout top, already setting up the descending channel. So, I mean, just looking at timing of a trade, if you were trying to match it up with the NASDAQ and saying that I want to take my trades when I feel the NASDAQ is at support, well, I would say this gap, if it follows this descending channel to this gap, you probably have some sort of uptrend, which fills this gap. This is a very good setup for trying to find a continuation move. And the reason being is because on Friday, you fill this gap. You retrace down, you've already missed all this volatility to the downside, and you respect the uptrend that it set Thursday. Thursday, you gap down, you take out the high, you set the higher low. Here's your green move 1, 2, 3, takes out the high, retest of the high, set the flat top, and Friday, boom, you take out that flat top. What would I be telling myself? All I want to see the NASDAQ do on Friday is fill the gap. NASDAQ fills the gap. What do we do? Bear flag. 1, 2, 3. Higher or lower high, and it continues, holds the uptrend. Now we gap up, retrace down, fill the gap. If it continues and takes out this high after filling out the gap, I would expect the NASDAQ to be strong. Looking at the daily, the strength tells you the catalyst is that big players are in the middle ground. I want to find out which way this is going to go. If the longs do win, I would say you're going to end up taking out this high. What's your retracement on the pullback? That's your last retracement. If you take out that last retracement, yes, you'll probably have a little bit of volatility off of this range, but looking at the NASDAQ in particular, that range is 2.5% away, where I wouldn't be surprised if that is a startup of even taking out the high of the year, where then we're looking to 2021, 2022 highs for a potential leg up. So slippery slope. We talked about 2.5% potential 8% move to the highs, where it might continue from there. So I do think that the long is setting up, and I also think that the short could potentially be setting up where we have a rejection of the high. All it would take is this sort of trend line break. The trend line sitting something like this, give or take. It's not perfect, but you guys get the gist. Where anytime I see rejections of these last retracements, you gotta have in the back of your head that if this is a wave pattern that's setting up, boom, we could hold this trend line, yes, and coil. If it coils and then breaks out the high, I'd say that's going to be a very bullish move, because the right minds, in my opinion, are short off of this area, this retracement area, which also has a gap down right around this area. Where if those shorts end up being right, yes, you might catch a bid, but as soon as this trend line cracks, I'm not going to have any faith in this low. Whether it gets bought up from that area or not, to me, I'm not going to have any faith in that low. I would expect some sort of crack of that a short pop where it's going to actually reject that low. And we've talked about this flat top that originally broke out the NASDAQ. There's your wave one. I'm sure that this percentage, give or take, is around 8-9% from this bottom of wave one. 8-9%. So if this ends up playing out like this, I think there's going to be economic data that correlates with it. I think there will also be economic data that correlates whether we get a move higher or not. And there's going to be some sort of news catalyst that's going to make everything sound like, oh yeah, this was the reason. But the real setup is already in the middle of the play. And there is a bull catalyst and there is a bear catalyst. I don't care what the news tells you. The news is gonna, majority of the time, the news and what people are gonna write about is gonna follow the trend. And if that trend is down, this is the area I'm going to want to punch in long. And adding just a cherry on top, just taking the bottom to the top. Whew, 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 whew. Ooh, you want to talk about a cherry? We got the sprinkles, the nuts, the hot fudge, the caramel. Yeah, that half meeting in off this flat top. If that's not a cherry on top, and you have it out of your mind that, oh, there's no way we can pull back to that flat top from here. This is the United States we're talking about. You better have a reality check because we're a couple weeks away, maybe a month or two away from having a deciding factor of this being reality. It could be reality that this actually catches a bit higher. When enough information is there, we're gonna know. Uh, but a little bit of a false breakout on this as well. So there is a bull catalyst for, hey, we've already tried taking out these retracements. It's not going to take too much to push us to those all-time highs. So yeah, I get both sides of the spectrum. And I'm just being patient and seeing which side of the spectrum is going to play out. But for everyone that has had a jolly good year, uh, that's all I'll say about it. So that's the NASDAQ talk. Looking around, ASTS, kind of following this sort of descending channel. Nothing crazy. Tried to peak out a little bit. I would expect it to probably retest down into these low 70s. Based off the candle showing me rejection already, but it could catch a bit off the gap up in this particular scenario. This does gap up. It tries to, you see this selling, I hadn't even looked at this at all today. You see this selling pressure right off this, we haven't really adjusted anything here. Just mark the descending channel and a potential ascending channel. But that 410 is your rejection area. All we did was mark the low. So yeah, just needs a little bit more time. Wouldn't be surprised to see this pull back in the 75s today. Wouldn't be surprised to see it take out this channel and catch a bid and try to push up to 4s. But time will tell. It's still in the channel, not anything to talk about there. I would say ATHM also trying to hold 30s. We have our plan set in place for this name. It's been a title name, I don't know how many days in a row. But until this gives us a channel or a trend line break, it is going to continue being a channel name until we get that 31 break. Until we get 31 break, I think that it is reasonable of finding an entry. And I'm going to be averaging up around these 29.50s if this pulls back in. If it pulls down in underneath my 29.50s, 29 is going to continue to be added for the trend line. And we talked about the NASDAQ. Might as well go talk over about oil. Let's talk about oil. If we talk about the NASDAQ, NASDAQ or the oil, really nice sideways consolidation. As we talked about early in the stream, we had a catalyst. If we just clear our chart, we felt over here when it wasn't quite testing up to this flat top. So this was the information we were looking at. We said, hey, setting these wick tops into this 702 or 786 retracement. There's our pullback. Boom, right into that 702. Anytime I see that, I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, and this is exactly how we had it mapped out, except for it pushed a little bit higher. We mapped this out from these top wicks when oil was still trading up here, and this just goes to show that anytime you see 702 reject, it's got to go into your head that, hey, this could easily be a 5-wave structure pattern into your support level, where this could have easily rejected, and before you know, it could have been down into these middle 80s. Well, catches a nice bid, and now that it showed us these wicks up to these 88s, um, we're continuing to see this trade side. We were continuing to see it put higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low even right here. And now we're wicking into sort of a neckline break where it gave you a move off the open right up to 88 over top of these highs even. And now we have this neckline. If this can hold and start to build this sort of U shape and continue to test 88s, before you know it, those 88s are going to break, and we have clear outs, our clear catalyst for a move to these mid 90s. Not necessarily 95, but getting into the 90s I would say is reasonable, where these 88 flat top being built is just your 382, where your half. I mean, if we end up trading in this range between the 382 and the half, I would say I would expect sideways consolidation, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this give some sort of move for that 618 or 702. I think with it being able to take out these mid 80s, that this is getting closer to calling this a retracement phase. But a really nice hold of that trend line on a strong name. We go over to the monthly chart, and this name has has yet to give up monthly strength. We all know that from 2020 up to 21 or 20 through 22s that oil was really strong, and you guys hear me say all the time that those big players are around that middle ground. We, even though oil was very weak, Invos crossing 29, we'll go take a look at that. Even though oil was very weak over the course of the end of 22 and into 23, that we looked at it as if you're looking long on this bullish move, that all this did was pull back into our middle ground, and now showing very good strength. So let's go take a look over at Invos. Invos, a nice clean 29 break. It's already up a quarter penny. Let's look at that 15 minute, and we can see that with 5 minutes left, you can see early signs of increased volume. So I'd say that is a good sign for this continuation. Whether this descending little wedge pattern is accurate or not, it does gap up and it doesn't have enough weakness. Off of seeing these two candles right here, I would be telling myself, hey, down to the gap seems reasonable. We retrace up. A potential sort of descending channel seems reasonable, and now discrediting that, tapping up to these 29s, and now over half a penny from that alert. I would say Invos, looking at the daily candle, anytime you're dealing with a candle that is on candle number 4, you have a nice green move on increasing volume, and on these 3 pullback candles, not only does each candle have a wick of buying, you're also decreasing volume. A slight increase right here, but you also had a washout wick, but still had the strength to hold these 25s. And what's important about 25s is this wick top. All just marking that wick top right there from the first move, wick top, boom. That is right at a 25 flat level, and now almost a whole penny in the money. This name is in volume picking up. It was at 14, and yeah, you can see right up to that 30, breaking over top of that wick high. So a really strong move. If this does want to come into the middle of this green candle, right around those 29s, we are going to take a live trade on this. We originally got stopped out at 30s for the name. Nope, we got stopped out. Where did we get stopped out at? I believe it was 30s. we had it set sort of like this. Yep, there it is, right at those 30 levels right there. Boom, tries to hold 30s. That's the exact moment we got stopped out originally. You know, it would be nice to sit back and say, oh yeah, why didn't we reload 25s? Off of this sort of channel, that it had a solidified channel, uh, watched it trade sideways long enough, we thought that it was reasonable for this to test back in the 22s, which also had a gap. But the longer it held this, the daily picture is going to give you the better look over a 15-minute chart. You see how this is just a sloppy channel? There's nothing really there. I would say your bigger picture is mapping out these lows and probably these highs. You probably have a false gap above that channel, and I would say this is how I'd have uh, my chart set up, where a potential extension, you're looking at this at 42s. If it's at 42s, you're above the start of the gap, or this could be the start of something for up to the top end of the channel, 3-4 weeks down the road. But a nice little push. Had I been on my toes just watching this throughout the course of maybe I could have set this alert a little bit earlier, where, hey, if this discredits a descending channel, we can call it a 28 break instead of a 29 break. If we had a 28 break, we had a whole consolidation period here, where if we switch to a 5-minute, you can see, boom, there is your actual start of your volume pickup, and a bull flag panned out on your 5-minute with each candle giving a wick. Now we're ready for the breakout at a 28.50. Instead of getting alerted at 29s, we are prepared for this. So I wouldn't be surprised, and you can see this volume really picking up now, over $0.015 in the money from our alert price. This is just a great example of trying to get an early entry before volume, where all of this action right here, your largest volume while we're identifying this is 70K, and now we're getting a candle that has a minute left on this 5-minute. Let's not forget, this is a 5-minute, and we're testing over 400K. Perfect example of identifying a play and setting and giving you a reason to get in before the volume it really starts to increase. But you can see the continuation move here. We have our increased volume. Let's see if this is going to continue higher, or if we're going to get a pullback into the middle of the green move before testing higher. But a really nice candle move here. And Invos is probably going to be on watch, and not to mention, all of this transpired at the same time that we were breaking a downtrend. So I mean, you want to add a cherry on top to having some conviction on a trade. There is a lot of correlating correlating information that we're taking that's all pointing to the same direction. That's why I try to add as many different strategies, as many different perspectives as I possibly can, because we know a short-term move, all that matters is if more liquidity is bought than sold on a particular day, particular candle, particular time, the price is going to go up. If you can find areas on the chart where more liquidity is going to get bought than sold, and you are successful at finding areas like that, you are going to be a very good trader. Now, trading and investing, of course, two different things. I would pinpoint this as momentum. And, to even add more perspective into it, we haven't even talked about the strength. This whole move today, we talk about the big players being around that middle ground. This whole move to the downside right here, your volume is nothing. Nothing. Now we're just starting to see this volume start to pick up when we solidify a positive break on our strength. I mean, there's not too many more perspectives we can add into this where we're saying, yeah, this is a good trade. Is it going to be able to continue higher? That's not up for me to decide. I'm just one guy. I don't have the liquidity to control price action. But one thing I will say is that if this candle does want to pull back into, call it 29s to 28s, I think it's worth dipping into it and testing the waters. Is it going to be able to pull back down far enough? I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, we watched it live. Uh, we watched it all happen live, and obviously me sitting here after it's already made the move, maybe you can say, oh, well, obviously you're going to say that after it's made the move. Maybe, maybe. Uh, but reevaluating how it played out, I would say that if I was watching it the whole time, I can't tell you for sure if I would have pulled the trigger, but I think I would have gave it a chance, saying that was the only alert we put in today. Aside from that, we put in a Palantir alert. That was it today. You guys want to go take a look at Palantir? How about that little flat top right there build? You have a catalyst for an ascending channel. You built this flat top over the course of Wednesday and Friday, flirting around that middle ground on strength, good volume, holding the price, and this is a big tell when it holds this sort of uptrend right here. That's the one candle that has increased volume. Uh, I wouldn't even I would say that this is probably a reasonable setup. You have an indecision candle, false breakout, and this candle a small red candle, leaving that little bit of a wick right there on decreased volume. Uh, Whenever taking these bull flag continuations though, where it's already made a green move, when it gets to this 1590 price, or maybe you want to wait for the 16 break, what does your volume candle look like? Is it increasing volume? Does it have matched volume from the beginning move where you have wick tops here and you're taking out these highs? So these two volume candles of 950K and 700K, if this takes out the high, with that increased volume, maybe there's something there. If it takes out the high and the volume stays low like this, I would be inclined to say that this is going to wick right back in and have to trade sideways a little bit. But when it takes out that high, I want to see that volume meet over here. So a couple different things to look for in this continuation play, but I think you have a catalyst. You have a gap up at 13 or 1634s. We have top end of the channel that we have to watch for. So based off this volume candle and what's doing, I would say that this is in the realm of giving you a false break originally, but that doesn't mean that it can't take it out later on. And who knows, maybe the light volume has enough weight to really push it higher. Uh, I don't know. Time will tell. We'll revisit Palantir, and maybe I can just throw it up here so we can watch it a little bit better. But I am kicking myself for not trying this. We had it identified. We got it alerted. It even gave a retest and wicked into that level. So at the bare minimum, I should have had a small entry. It would have never gave me a pullback into this 1550s. But you can see the wick pressure. I mean, the volume is already telling you that, hey, this is light volume. I don't know if this is ready to go yet. But maybe even a retest of this 75s. We can move that alert up before those 75s. But I like that wick top right there. And if that alerts us, we'll tune back into it and see what it's doing. Invos, given a continuation candle, volume, beautiful volume, 10 minutes left, great volume, great healthy candle. Already taken out the highs of the previous candle. I would say that your volume is going to increase relative to the candle before. So when this starts the pullback, now I can't tell you it's going to, but I am going to assume that at some point during the day, this is going to give you a 3 candle pullback. And in that 3 candle pullback, all I'm going to look for, since I missed my entry here, it's going to have to pass my rules completely for me to try this. And where it's probably going to end up being at is at a 2950 wick top, which you can see got bought up right here at the start of this candle, or potentially we'll just mark that 29 flat again. Just, I'm sure if we go to a 5 minute, there's maybe something there. There's not really anything there, so maybe we'll just watch it accordingly. But I'm not going to take this breakout for a higher move, even though it looks good. And I'm not saying that, oh, he said that we're looking for a 3 candle pullback, so that's going to happen. For all I know, this rips. For all I know, it rips. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball here, guys, but for me to take this trade, I'm going to need this nice volume increase, nice green candles to, one, this 8 minutes and 50 seconds left. I'm looking for this to give me a close and not be too much of a wick top. I want it to see a healthy green candle close. Like if this closed as a red candle with large increased volume right there, that would be a kind of a stay away for me. That doesn't mean that it can't eventually take out that high, but if it closes as a healthy green candle, preferably above this wick at 30.50, with this increased volume, if we get light volume, where is a good example? Where maybe you could say this is a chop, so I wouldn't say this is a solidified bull flag. Uh, that's not a good example either. Maybe this doesn't have the greatest look, but we are going to keep this puppy on watch. And let's go elsewhere and see if we can find anything. Baba giving up 88.50s. I would say it's gonna come in the question of whether 87s can hold. If 87s can show a hold, I would say that this trend line, probably not a perfectly set trend line. There's probably multiple different ways that you can play this. Whether you moved it up higher through the body candles and gave it this, well, that's only really 2 points of contact. That's adding a lot of weight for these 87 lows. But one thing about the BABA being down 2% today is the ATHM isn't really selling off. So this is, I mean, the only title name that we have. The only one that I really just, maybe I'm starting to get a little emotional attachment to it. It's possible. But it is showing a little bit of resistance into this continued downtrend. But around 28, 29.50s, I think we're going to continue adding to it, and we'll see how it goes. Whoa, 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 whoa. Geo, we were just looking at this on the stream, talking about it. Can this hold sevens? And here, a 750 break is looking legit. Clear volume increase. I mean, we scroll back. I mean, we're dating back into March here, and this is the largest volume that whoa. If you would have told me that this was gonna bounce from 7 straight up to 50s, and this is just a prime example of, not panicking. I'd say this Geo has done this to me twice now, where this one actually feels a little bit more legit, where, we traded below the 7 level, which is what we've really been trying, and wow. Yeah, trying to reclaim that positive, well, it has now. If this gives us a 750 break, I mean, I wouldn't say it's out of the woods yet. There's your 750, where if this gets over top of 75s, I'd say your first clean retracement is 825s, which I think we'd be foolish not to take a piece off in front of these retracement levels. But yeah, this is a beautiful hold of that 7 level. It had red engulfing coming on into the level, acted like it wanted to continue trading down. Yeah, nice little move here. And honestly, with these green candles, this volume's not going to increase on this candle, and it has sort of a wick top that's taken out. But over 750, I would say, looks pretty good. Charles with the GNS. Yes, I'll go over the GNS and take a look at GNS. What do we got here? Down 7% on the day, but off of first look, I'd say it looks like it's still trading in the range. Hold on, I'm going to finish my coffee here. GNS, looks like we do have, off of small looks, that this is the channel that we're looking to see. Yesterday, or on Friday, we got that neckline break, tested up to this resistance. I was actually watching this on Friday. I didn't have work on Friday, so I was able to worked the market all day. We were watching this, and we actually were looking for this to break over top of 25s. We were sitting here on this candle, debating whether we wanted to try it or not. What kept me away from trying it is looking at the candle. Now, I know that might sound easy to say, but this red candle that came in, we didn't want to try it right here. Main reason was, where is your volume? For us to take it, we just got done talking about it on the last one. When we take out this high right here, if I'm getting ready to take this breakout trade, right, I want to see that volume meet. And honestly, on this move up, you don't really have much volume leading up to that candle. So a lot of boom, just huge volume push, pushed it up. I would say potentially manipulated type of move. But when you get this breakout candle, not have that volume, it's like, okay, we're going to come back into the level. Well, when it leaves this type of candle with not too much of a wick, I got to see that price get over top of that red candle and then see the volume start to pick up. It started to pick up a little bit. And then right here, when this next candle came in, it was like, okay, I instantly just marked a descending channel, which it wasn't like that. It was probably more so like this. But now looking at the move, you can see that as I pull this same channel down, that we're just trading in this tight channel. But you still have an uptrend. So we're getting closer to that decision point where uh, um, which way is this? Is this going to continue to be able to hold this price action? Not a lot of volume on this first move, and flirting like expected right around this middle ground. So those big players are in this middle ground right here, where if this short pans out, you're going to see a crack of this trend line. How does it act at the gap? Is there gap fill buyers off 105, or you're going to get a bullish move where 116 could be looked at as a neckline? And why is it a neckline? Not because you could get a higher low confirmation here and takes out the high. No, it's because you pull it a little bit further to the left. That's actually your previous low. So you break down that low, you retest that low, you reject. If it keeps rejecting that, um, it's going to be a little bit alarming, but if it trades sideways long enough where this could be a neckline break, where if you get that price action above that, I'd want to see what my volume looked like when it did that. But is it going to have the strength to push back up and coil like a wedge pattern up to this 130? Where if it pans out like that, we're looking at September 15th. So over the course of this move, does it continue to hold this trend line, and does it give me a true break? Where we talked about this, if we just clear the whole chart and we said that for this bear flag, we got a bear flag down. This is 1, 2, 3, and you have sort of decreased volume. But on the move down, one thing that you have going for you is that you don't have increased red volume. You have decreasing red volume. Another thing is on your daily chart, your strength is still positive. So until this really discredits this bottom, which is called a 95, I would say as long as it's above this, it has a chance to build this sort of uptrend, which can be pulled sort of like that. Is it going to be an ascending channel? I would need to have more information, but a 130 break, if it gets over top of these wicks, you don't know who's in short. So if the right position is in short right here, I'd say over top of 130 is going to be that breakout that we're looking for. So when the time comes, uh, we'll just go ahead and put that alert for a 125 break right before that 125. If this gets over the bodies of these candles, we will alert this since we've talked about it enough. And if it can do that, we will try it. We will, if the right setup is there, of course. But Palantir, we can go look back at Palantir. A nice move, getting closer to that positive break. It rejected positive. Let's look at the 15-minute and see that a nice green candle and actually gives you a volume increase above this. So now, looking at this, it doesn't really take out this high yet. But if this second candle, this is a healthy green candle close. If this second candle increases above this candle and gives a breakout, I wouldn't be surprised to see this continue. Which it's testing 16 right now. We have the fresh open of the candle. A nice look, honestly, here. It might not even care whether this volume is starting to pick up or not, but really in this pullback move, that decrease in volume is enticing. But I'd say Palantir looks pretty decent. In phase, kind of trading in that same range. Invos. Is this going to be, we have the 1, 2, 3, a nice close. Not too much of a wick top right there. But it does have a wick top of selling pressure. Where that comes in at, sort of these highs. But if we do get 3 candle pullbacks into this 29, I think that is going to be uh, a reasonable setup. It might not even care about that. So a couple different options that we're looking at here. You know, if you guys particularly have anything else that you want me to take a look at, by all means, I'm going to give you an unbiased opinion. I'm not going to beat around the bush. And I'm actually going to go check my schedule for the day as well. It doesn't look like I have anything today. But I am going to send out a message. Because normally on a Monday I'm going to have... One sec, guys. Alright, let's focus back up. Let's see if we can find something for you guys. We're just going to go ahead and sort this by volume. CGC, obviously a ton of volume. Nikola, we talked about this coming back to 91s, and I gave an example of how I'd play a weak name off of a gap fill on something that we got stopped out of. But I would be surprised if this... Okay, it looks like I have nothing for today. So as long as we keep this viewer count up, I will stream this all day. Unless it just gets kind of boring. But let's hopefully we can get into something, and we'll go from there. But I would say Nikola 70 level to 60 is areas where you can look for small scalps. And if you get the right movement off one of them, maybe you can get a golden entry. But this is a name I wouldn't even think about. Tilray, volume is high, elevated strength, has a reasonable resistance level around these 25s. If you can get this right, you can catch a nice candle up to 50s, which I'd say that's your previous low. It breaks it down, test. It's already wicking towards that level, but I'd say from 25 to 60s, you can have easy outs in front of 50s, which is still 8% continued move, 12% movement to that flat bottom. Let's look at the 15-minute here. We can see this actually might have something in store for us. The one part that's a little bit scary does have the decreased volume, pulling back into a wick top right here, but this red candle, anytime you see a red candle like this and you're trying to play a bull flag, what happens as soon as it takes out the wick low from the first candle? So I just marked below that red engulfing, and that's the same candle that's struggling to get over, giving you the stair step look. Now, if this does stair step, do I have any levels that we can trade to? I do. We have these wick tops from the beginning that when it took it out, the buying, look at that as your top volume increase right there. So when that volume increase right there comes in, it's pretty much right off that break. So we can go and look at exactly when that took place, which we know it's right here. You can see a nice solidified increase in volume as soon as it takes that out, where it's light volume. Sort of, you're looking for this continuation candle. Now when we break over top of this first candle, look at the volume exceeds, and then it doesn't exceed right here, but you have a lot of decreased volume. Boom, 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 boom. We have 5 decreasing volume candles relative to that initial volume from the open of the day. Now the next thing I'd say is there a trend line? Well, the trend line could potentially be breaking right now, but this is a 5-minute, so I'm not going to say that this is solidified by any means. But it would be concerning if this stair stepped and just left a wick right back up and tried to reclaim 25s. Looking at it from this perspective, I'd probably pull this down in sort of like that, leave it a tight ascending channel. So you have a catalyst for an ascending channel. I was trying to understand when you was on GNS and thought you were talking about an engulfing candle. I didn't, that was an engulfing candle. Let me go back to GNS and maybe you can explain. Uh, I'd say your big picture is that you have a potential channel being built where if this channel is going to work, it's going to happen at this. I mean, you've double topped into this area, and that actually is previous resistance. When it breaks it down, it retests, retests, retests. Now, even if you do get that 130 break, I would say that these upper 130s is going to be respectable because you gap down right to this level, you hold, you break down with no retest. So if you were looking at taking the right type of setup, where if you got a golden entry and the right movement came off of this previous low, could also be a descending channel break, something like this. You have a descending channel and you have a trend line. So if this gave you the right movement off of a 116 and it gave you a push up to those 130s, I'd say this getting the 116 entry, I would respect the 120s all the ways up to that 129, and if you're lucky, you can get a breakout. Now if it rejects that, my reloads would come off my initial entry or the trend line as protection. So let's say we got a move and it pulled back in. Even though it gets below my original entry, I would look at reloads off of this trend line and having clear outs underneath of that low. So like a 108 out. Now that 108 out could wick you out with a 105 fill of that gap. But I would say GNS just needs to work out some levels right now, and it's respectably light volume because a lot of people are waiting to see which direction this is going to go. That's what I'd say about it. I don't know which particular, maybe it was when I was talking about this candle right here, the red engulfing candle, maybe that's, or possibly right here. But when this candle came in, it was clear that, it's going to need a little bit of time. I wasn't going to try and force, just because this is an indicator, the candlesticks and the technicals of the chart didn't represent taking the trade for this candlestick. So even though it has an indicator right here, it doesn't mean that it's going to catch a bid. That's just kind of just adds a little bit of confirmation into what you're looking for. Every company that did a blockchain dividend squeezed. I think there is a lot of logical fallacies that are built into that statement. Just because it happens once or happens with another company doesn't mean that it's going to happen with another particular company. So I don't try to take that into consideration. That'd be like me saying, oh, Tesla caught a big bid today. That means all EVs are going to catch a big bid today. Well, I mean, we just got done looking at Nikola earlier, and we can see that, it's all that matters is that if more liquidity is bought than sold at a particular price, the price will move up and then rinse and repeat over and over and over and over again all day, every day, for as long as the market's open, whether it's in pre-market, after hours, you name it. A short-term move is defined based off of the liquidity on the book. So that's what I'd say about that. Looking at Invos, we can see, okay, starting to leave that wick top, so we can see some definite selling pressure coming in at this area. Is this going to be an area that can give us our pullback that we're looking for? And if so, well, Geo right up to that 750. Beautiful, beautiful move right here on Invos. I understand. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, obviously, they're to an extent, when you have, like you said, every company that has blockchain is moving today. Uh, there can definitely be increased eyes on an industry or a set of companies based off of that. Where if you have more eyes and those eyes all kind of come to the same conclusion that, hey, this setup looks pretty decent, let's try it, and then that adds that influx of liquidity. It all kind of builds to a catalyst of where you can get that increased liquidity coming off the books. You know what I mean? But just because I just think it's still about the setup. It's still about um, at the end of the day, like I said, if that liquidity comes off the books at whatever rate that it needs to. I mean, that is what it would need. But we'll see. We have an alert on GNS, and maybe we can just start. You know, I had it off these 125s, but let's put it for this one. We'll just go 115. If it triggers off 115, we'll watch it act off this 116 area, and we'll see where it goes from there. I'll do that for you at least, Charles. Looking at TNGX, man, this one's really gonna haunt me. But a really good teaching moment where I could have easily had that out, and we'd still be sitting in this, and we'd actually probably would have averaged more in. But with the wash sale, this is honestly a pretty decent look, where you give the move, not the most amount of volume, but decreasing volume and now picking up the volume. And now a pullback in and just a hold of 750 for this name looks really good if it just trades sideways long enough. I'd say that's a pretty interesting setup right there. We said we were gonna find something, and now honestly, Devon coming all the ways back in. I'm actually a little bit intrigued here. We got the dividend that's getting ready to come out, but a nice red candle coming on in through the level. This is getting in territory where you're right at that neckline. The red engulfing is a little bit scary, but I'd be shocked if this candle didn't leave some sort of a wick buy at some point in the day. If this comes down into the trend line, it's going to be not even really care for me uh, whether this gets bought up from the trend line or not. It's just going to be, yeah, let's punch in for some more shares and build this position a little bit more. But I'd say Devon is, with the oil being elevated the way it is, still trying to hold 70 or 87s. I think there is a reasonable catalyst for oil to be up in the triple digits. That may be a little bit rich, but I will not shy away from adding this trend line if it comes back on in. In Palantir, given that rejection of 16, so looking back at the candle, let's look back at Palantir. Now this is a really good example of washout top, where I would be very interested what the volume looked like when it took out this 16. But now coming back in, is this going to represent an opportunity to buy? We can see 1590s catches a bid. Let's see what this 5-minute looks like. You can see it actually did have the breakout buying. This is a nice green candle. Your volume comes in off of this breakout, but the selling just kind of exceeding it right now. Coming on into the middle of this move, I would say you probably have an uptrend right here where this could continue giving you that move. I just really regret not having
This original flat top break. It's something I should have pulled the trigger on. I regret not pulling the trigger on it for sure. Where I would be surprised if I didn't have some outs into that 16, especially maybe you can just mapping out these wick lows over here. You can see we could have potentially actually had some open orders off of that. Charles, it's cool. I understand a little more the day trading mentality of trade what you see as well. Um, yeah, and it's at the end of the day, Charles. I say it every live stream is I'm just a guy. Like I don't have any control of what happens, and I also make mistakes all the time. Uh, and even early in my career, I made really bad mistakes that you know whether you put up my whole type of resume together and say, am I justified to come on here and at times I would say I probably do sound like a smartass. I sound like I know everything. I sound like oh, there's always a reason for this or a reason for that. And, you could look at that as excuses being made. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to add as much information as possible, whether it's right or wrong, but having the playbook in set in stone where I have a process that works for me. It doesn't mean that what I do is going to work for you. Um, it's really important for all traders, all investors, which trading and investing is two different things in my book, two completely different things. And it's very important to find what works for you. Whether it's, adding information of what I say and maybe information from another guy, and maybe you pick up a couple things on your own and you kind of just mix that all into a big bag. And you pull out these tricks out of these bags or these opportunities or these setups out of your playbook and use them to work for you. And at the end of the day, there isn't a trading strategy that is 100%. A trading strategy, there is always going to be risk reward in a trade. There's always going to be implied volatility in an investment. Uh, me, I think end phase is always going to be a prime example that I'm going to be able to go back to and say that this is a prime example of an investment that I was okay. I was okay holding this against me. We were sitting in at a 160 something average, small position. We averaged accordingly, and this pulled all the ways back in, all the ways into the 120s before we even averaged into the position again. And so I already went against my position 25% before we even really averaged into the position. But over the course of the long term, my investing strategy with this name, I was always clear that even when I was telling myself, hey, this is probably going to keep falling, I'm content that, at some point in time with this investment, these 160s are going to be in the money. And partially there could be some emotions attached with it, and maybe I have a couple different things that I need to tweak, but I was also able to learn a lot from this position. And this is the investing side of things. If I was looking at this as a trade, it would be easy to sit here and say, yeah, let's get out off this 150 break to the downside. Yeah, I mean it's easy to look back and learn from it, but that is the the cold hard truth of investing sometimes, and that's why investing is different than trading. There's an interesting book, The Little Book That Beats the Market. It's a book that I would recommend. It taught me a lot. But looking, I'm not going to go into any details of The Little Book That Beats the Market. But looking elsewhere, I see Intel's flat, ATHM still trying to hold these 30s. Invos still trading around these 31s. The more green candles that come in, if this were to end up taking out the highs, I would probably end up just flipping this to a 30-minute chart where you can see we have 9 minutes left in this candle. What does this 30-minute candle close look like? Is this a catalyst for our pullback into the 29s? Uh, so we are going to keep that on watch and continue watching it. Looking elsewhere, Palantir rejecting and leaving that washout top on increased volume. Where you can see each one of these 30-minute candles is a decreasing green volume. Where looking at the 15, it's sort of giving you that look like, hey, how do we act when we come into this 15 area? Is it going to break this sort of trend line? I wouldn't say that's a solidified trend line. Uh, but looking at this more, I'd say I'd be very interested in this 1560 range, where if you go back to that 30 minute, you can see uh, having these roll in through this area relatively strong. I would say it is possible that it could pull back into this trend line. So maybe some outs. We can try the gap. And, we're gonna need more information on this name, but this channel looks really good. And looking at the daily chart, it is putting in a nice green candle. If it can get this positive break on strength, I wouldn't be surprised to see this be a retracement. Where if we looked at it as a retracement, you can see rejecting that 382, which also is a previous low over here. You have a gap fill meeting up around that half. You have a gap fill meeting up around that 618 and 702. Uh, and your breakout is a flat top gap. So I like when my breakout has a flat top gap where, I wouldn't be surprised if this really started catching volume on a 20 break, where it will fill that gap, maybe a little bit of sell off, but boom, as soon as it takes out this high, this could be a continued move. So a lot of things adding in for a catalyst of retracement with the potential of a breakout pushing up higher, where your entirety of the move, you reject these lows originally. This is your 20, where top end of this little channel that we're in right here is 27s. I wouldn't be surprised on a 20 break if this really got going into those 20s. Obviously, zooming into it more, if that move were to come into play, I'd say you have a flat bottom break on continuation, a nice bear flag. You have increased volume off of your earnings. Boom, boom. 1, 2, 3. Couple candles that really play out, and boom, no retest. But I'd say 22s, maybe top end of 2150s looks reasonable. But Palantir is setting up decent. But if this retracement rejects that 702, you guys know how I play a 702 retracement. Pull back, 702 retracement. It tries to hold this channel level. It ends up breaking it. You have a gap fill down here at 12s, where 12s probably catches a bid short term, and then rejection down to your original positive break. Where's your positive break? Boom, here's your positive break. Nice little S. Takes out the high. You guys see what I'm looking at here? You guys see what I'm looking at here? You also have a gap that could potentially catch a bid. And then you have a descending channel. Give or take something like this. So a bear catalyst and a bull catalyst for the name. But honestly, a decent setup. A decent setup. Invos, still trying to hold this level. A nice green candle, type of a continuation candle. Uh, when we get to this point where we're breaking over 35, I would expect a ton of volume to come in, and we think that it's possible, but it's going to need some time. It's going to need some time. Looking at Soundhound, let's take a look and see if we ended up getting stopped out of this puppy or not. Looks like 24s is the low. We actually have a stop in at 22s. Believe it if you want to. We have a stop in at 22s. We said, yeah, we're done with this name if those trigger us, and I wouldn't be surprised if it would have triggered and caught a bid. But trying to hold 30s. Let's go take a look at the 15-minute here. You can see red engulfing right through the level. Us a little while back probably would have just put a hard stop right underneath 25s. We would have got triggered out. We said 22s, we'll give it a few pennies. If it wants to trigger us, then it triggers us. But trying to hold the level, we need like a 240 break if this is going to end up panning out for us and not stopping us out. But a clear descending channel where 22s, bottom end of the channel, eh, we'll be telling ourselves that, hey, we think that this is going to break down simply because, I mean, there's not too much more leeway we can give this, which we felt today when I put that red engulfing that it was actually giving us a move through the trend line. And another reason why we didn't want to give it too much leeway. Geo's still sitting right around this 750. Warner Bros. Reject of 12, which is what we kind of said is that, this 12 was holding quite well. Hold, 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 break, reject, reject. But testing up to that level, I'd say, yeah, it probably does have some downside risk from here. But if this does end up playing out how we think is reasonable, we like the move that it's had, and we do have some retracements that can hold. If this was a name where, let's say, the move was higher and this was the last retracement right here, we'd really be thinking about outs underneath of this wick low. But I wouldn't be surprised if it tried to continue holding this 702. This is the main reason why we even had the resilience to try and hold this. Just because it sort of was catching a bid, I am not expecting this to hold. But I think 1050s is a reasonable area where it could hold, and we have a gap at 950. So we'll see how this ends up playing out. BAC kind of in that same boat, trying to hold the trend line, has a descending channel, has a long-term channel. I think it's reasonable to think long term at the bottom end. Whether it has some more volatility to the downside or not, it's possible, more than possible. Looking at oil still trying to hold these 87s. Indecision candle at its finest. We can honestly put an alert off of these. Oops, wrong. If that breaks 88, we think that we're going to get a significant leg to the upside that potentially has the catalyst to push 90s. In my humble opinion, I think that it could potentially be setting up for that. ATHM, you can see we gap up. Gap fill buyers are there. If this is going to be a name that gets some continuation, you can see not much selling pressure, not much buying pressure either. How does this act if it were to break day's high, which is right at the 3050? Let's look at some names. Let's find something. CG and C, a little bit of increased red volume has wicks of buying. If it's able to break over top, it could get some continuation. But I'm trying to stay away from the cannabis because I would expect MSOS to catch a bid, which we're still holding a decent position of. So yeah, aside from missing the CG or the CGC down, almost getting wick lows. It's not like we're not making money on the move with a decent piece into cannabis as we've been trimming IIPR, but we're really looking for a push into those 90s. But we think these 88 is a reasonable area to have taken our first trims on the name as it trades sideways long enough here. You can see flat bottom break, boom, tries to hold it, reject, reject, reject 3 times, and now this is the price that we're kind of hanging out at. So if this wants to give us some continuation, we'll be looking a little bit more bullish on the name where we're thinking start of the gap for our next fills, next trims in these mid 90s, and a push for 110s. The gap fill. Can maybe think about an exit of the position if that comes into play. But also approaching this next dividend. This next dividend should be getting announced reasonably soon. which is going to add in uh, how we can expect to play this position when we see when this next dividend is going to be at. But let's find a play. Let's find something. Tilray, Mullen. Let's take a look at Mullen. Mullen still in that oversold area. Is this going to catch a bid? I'd say your risk reward. It's setting up that flat top where it tried to have those breakout buyers right here. If it can hold this range, it's trying to give you a catalyst for a wedge pattern where all it would take is a break over top of this. But kind of put on the map early on the very first candle. Is it going to have enough juice? I just don't think the strength is there yet to try it. K-View, man, we have been keeping our eye on this name. We think we have a reasonable descending channel. But the strength just isn't there. We thought we had a trend line building here. Obviously we didn't. Boom, cracks. Where if this, instead of, just imagine this chart. If this support level right here holds, where you probably had clear stops off of this 22 break. Boom. Stop loss is getting smoked. You got a break of the commodity. But if this were to have broke this neckline higher, where we hold this level right here at 22 halves, this would have been an interesting little decision where we would have had alerts off this neckline. Now it would have had a gap that would have had to fill, and you also would have had a downtrend. But it's a name that we've been watching, but not ready to take it yet. MRO or Mara, this is trading right in at a monster level. But I think a lot of these. Thanks for tuning in, Charles. I appreciate that. You have a good rest of your day, and have a good Monday. Hope to see you on the stream later on in the week. Looking at Neo still trading down. Rivian actually has a nice flat top that's building right here. Right around the middle ground. You guys know I love this middle strength. Let's go into a 15-minute and see if we can find anything. One, two, three, decreasing volume. Let's go ahead and just test the waters with a small position here on Rivian. We think that the setup looks reasonable, and I'm itching to take something and give you guys a little bit of something to watch. So we'll take this Rivian, and we're gonna give it outs underneath of these wick lows right here, or wick tops right here. So this is a 3310. You probably have a potential trend line. But this is able to catch a bid right here. We can try and be on the ask or the bid here at these 23s. But it does have a downtrend. We're not going to make it sound like it's perfect. It's rejecting that downtrend. If we get a break of this downtrend right here, it might not look half bad. Like gaps up, tries to break over top of this downtrend, trades back in. It has gap fill buyers, and it's trying to catch a bid. Trade sideways where here's your move, 1, 2, 3, and now it's building this smiley face right here. So realistically, not a half bad setup and not a volatile one. So if this does go against us, we're not gonna lose out of too much. But let's try a just starter position here and see if we can get some movement to the upside. I like the way this Rivian is setting up. Let's try a small position here and let's see if we can find something else. I don't know why we have this marked right here, but it gets direct wick correlation. Let's take a look at this. Why did we mark this? Wow, right into a support level dating back to 2008.
Sheesh. Getting absolutely clobbered. Wow. Actually has bottom end channel potentially here. Wow. What a move to the downside here. Let's look at this 15-minute. Just got done paying a dividend, so that's out of the water. That dividend came at 27 bucks. Shoom. Yeah. Wow. Walgreens. I didn't even realize how low this was. Wow. Put Rivian up here. Wow. Walgreens. Go EV. Don't like the lower highs. SoFi. Ooh, SoFi actually not a half bad look. Let's alert SoFi on this ahead of this 90 break. Oh boy, we're out of alerts. You can take that oil one off. We don't need it. You can take this off. I don't even know it. That reminds me, I do want to go take a look at TO. TO flat. Rivian down to 24s. You can see the daily. Man, this is. It's right at this resistance level though, which is a little bit concerning. Path, man. Sometimes when I just get that look, man, we're a tight ass for 13 cents. Now it costs me a $5 move. DocuSign. Trading back down to the level. Rivian trading back into this level. Alright, this is where we're going to try and averaging this in the middle of this green candle right there. Gives that washout top feel. But let's go ahead and try Geo continuation move through those 750s. Looks good. No size off of 22s. We could have tried it there. Devon leaving that a little bit of a wick. We go over to this daily candle. You can see it's starting to leave that wick. Palantir back into the level. I don't like testing with these previous shoulder on a washout top. Wow, look at that. You would have thought indecision candle. Now really testing the highs right here. Invos. This one is going to be one that am going to regret. Yep, this is going to get going right here. Volume is elevated, but Oh, we have 4 minutes left. This is going to give you the decision here in this next couple minutes if this is going to work out or not. There, the volume has exceeded the previous candle. Not quite up to this wick top candle yet. ATHM showing you that move. NVAX tested up to that little hold, breakdown, retest. Other than that, I mean, there's nothing on our watch list that we're looking at and saying that, yeah, this is something. Aside from Invos, this was really the only one. We watched it live. I should have realistically took it. Um, and this is something that happened to me last week as well, where we just had that alert price a little bit too high. Where the alert price, had we looked into it more, we should have had that alert off that 28, and it would have alerted us. But Rivian coming on into these low 20s, still light volume. So let's try and get another small ad right here and see if we can find some small positives on the day. Which, if this ends up going against us, um, we think that is reasonable, and that should have gave us a fill there off of 21s, and it did. We did get 21s there. We can back at Invos and see it's wicking up to that level. Yeah, Invos is probably one that we could have had, even off this 29.50 break. Be sitting 9%, not terrible. And down into this level, red engulfing through that green move. We'll try one more small ad right here and maybe one more off of the lows, and then we'll put our stop in for the name. So we'll see if this Rivian is going to pan out for us or not. But we'll try it for a little bit more size right here. That should have gave us 19 halves. $30 left. We'll see if this can hold this level. I think this is a reasonable support level to look at. But the lower highs is a little bit concerned. Bit of a volume jump at the back end of this 15-minute candle is nice, leaving a wick down into that level. But looking at the daily candle, you can see
Uh, Nice consistent volume trading it sideways and a couple buying candles into the middle of this green candle. Doesn't look half bad. If it's able to close above this 2320 level, we might even think about holding this through the 24 break. If it gets over 24, looking at it from a retracement, you can see that 2380 is that half. Or if we can fight through that, we can look for some continuation moves up into these 24s. So we'll see if this can pan out or not. We're not completely sold on it. But you can see the coil pattern where we feel this is an area where it can make a decision where if we break lower, 2310 out seems reasonable. Even though you're probably right into a sort of trend line right around that area that could wick into. ATHM is really the main name that we've been talking about, and it's nice to see it, even with Baba. You know, and this is kind of what we're talking about here. Even though it, we just wanted to see 87s hold today. If it closes above 87, I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to be like, oh, dude, we gotta. No, I think this is going to take some time. Anytime you're dealing with a trend line, it's impossible to know the perfect level that you want this trend line to go off of. But you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If this wants to catch a bid, it's at an area where it can potentially set a higher low. Where all it would take is for this to start churning, discredit the start of the gap, discredit your EMAs, discredit the gap at 94. If this gets over 96, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are like, man, why wasn't I buying that trend line? And they would think that they have it all righteous on on how this trend line is supposed to be set. Like, man, I could have been buying that. But I'd say Alibaba just holding 87 is all we really want to see. And a couple of wick buys, leaving a red engulfing at the time. But as we know, this is sort of an area, the last two earnings reports, back-to-back earnings reports, where the average price of shares bought for Alibaba from the company was 87 to 89. So I would be surprised if they didn't execute a little bit of buying today. Maybe they did. Maybe part of this green move. I'd actually be surprised if part of this green move wasn't some buying from the company. But, you know, obviously you can't really tell. We'll see on their next earnings report that is a couple months away. So, yeah, I'm not going to make it sound like, oh, dude, this is going to moon from here. Uh, but I would be surprised if they weren't executing buybacks today. Devon continuing to leave a little bit of a wick there. Same with in our Invax. Nasdaq short, still trading in a potential range. Invos continuing to churn higher. You know, it kind of sucks. This is the type of setup that we should probably had. We like the look when we looked at it over the weekend, and it opens with a shaved bottom, slight gap up, which is your tell. This is actually your tell right here when it doesn't have the weakness to trade down. What is that? 2/10. 2/10 of a penny. This doesn't have the strength to trade down. Actually, I lied. Gaps up. It's as low as it's damn close, but 2/3 of a penny. It's a decent look. Looking at Rivian, you can see it's sort of just trading sideways a little bit. The wick buying at the end of that candle pushing up is decent. We think we'll have a winner on this name if this can really start giving us that curl. TNGX. Not surprised to see this candle given that type of move. Light volume. Man, it sucks that just on Friday we are getting out of this position. That sucks. It sucks. But looking at the right names, we're very close to having a really good winner on this name. It sucks not having it, of course. Rivian right back into these 20s and getting bought up, so a little bit of demand building here. Oops. But I will say TNGX is a prime example of buying higher when you have the conviction on a move. Like right here, we talked about all it would take is a 750 hold. It didn't even really pull into 750s, where you could have had an alert set right above this, and you could be entering in. You'd be 12 pennies in the money, which doesn't sound like much until a couple days from now. This is testing up to nines potentially, and that's where those ones really get to you, because we were testing the waters with this, in this consolidation period, and all it took was we were just a little bit too early, where we had no clear, uh, lovely candles that we could really go off of. Where this is a nice, lovely candle, pulls back in, you can see the higher low get made, and the discredit of the descending channel. You can see the descending channel build and discredits it right there. This is kind of the bread and butter. That is the bread and butter type of setup right there. Holds the 21 and boom. So realistically, it could easily be a nice 2.5% in the money. Just being patient on the name. So that's unfortunate. But looking at Palantir, let's take a look over at Palantir. Palantir pulling right into the level. I would say we're probably not going to test the waters with Palantir. That wick top coming very close to that gap. I just don't know. But Rivian, wait a minute. Rivian showing this smiley face sort of continuation. So nothing to brag about by any means, but we probably have 21 average. Pulling back in. If this wants to work out for us, we think that this could be something that catches a bid early entry for you can see it setting up the flat top. You can see it's wick, 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 wick. Tries to get there early, where the 50 penny move is 2% to the flat top, where a lot of people are going to be looking for that breakout trade, in my opinion, if it gets over closer to these 24s. And right back in, so yeah, this is going to take some time. So boring trade, not one that we're looking for a super large move off the rip, but if it does take out these 2340s, Intel still continuing to be green. I think there's a clear catalyst for this to build and just continue churn up, continue trend up. FVR, you can see the consistent higher lows being formed, a couple lower highs as well. Baba continuing a small churn. It does have increased red volume on the move down right here, and here we are again right at these lows that it kind of broke down before. Is it going to get that same type of selling and shorting pressure off of that? Is what I'd want to know. Disney kind of gave up the ghost. I didn't even see that. Disney did the job though. I mean, you guys can see the job that it did right here, and this is all drift. I know you've talked about short Disney, and I've been holding the Disney. Let me know if you're still there, Drift. I'd imagine that you are. I'm not gonna say that you're not there because I'd imagine you are there. But I mean, we talked about this. For me to be sold on these 80s, I gotta see it one break over top of this low. Palantir crossing over as expected. One, we gotta see it break over top of these lows. Well, it's rejecting these lows. Closing below these lows is still bearish in my opinion. But two, we gotta see it fill this gap. If it fills this gap and holds these 80s and then breaks over top of this wick top for today, the Disney potentially has a chance to break stride, where a move higher might not be out of the question. But you can see the support level around here, whether you bring it down to 79s or not. But I would say that Disney checked the box for me today, just today. Now that doesn't mean, oh, check the box for him, punch long. No. No. This is a weak name that hasn't even got over that oversold area yet. But filling that gap, check the box. I would say that this was a very easy short for today. It was a very easy sell for today. And we talked about it on Friday where if you were really looking to get out of this position, that gap is where you're going to want to do it. If not that gap, you can also think about this flat bottom break, which I don't know why it's not marking it. There we go. Flat bottom break, boom. And it gives you that frowny face trend sideways. Well, now you can see the potential channel that's taking place where all it would take a higher low and a discredit of that channel where if this caught a bid above these 84s now, that's going to discredit, and is it going to be able to reject 85s and trade sideways long enough to break 85s? So it's checking the boxes and doing what it needs to do as of right now. But back to Rivian. My bad, I'm getting off track. Rivian holding these 25s now. We can see the candle is actually starting to catch some steam, which I'm not surprised. And I know if Charles was here, he'd be like, "Why would you buy that red engulfing candle here, but not do that on GNS?" Um, this was definitely two different scenarios where this uh, liquidity is fairly consistent. I mean, even looking to some of these low candles over here, these are still getting 50K of volume for $23 stock. I mean, 50K of volume, 23. It's 100 something K liquidity. Just to map that out. 1.1 million in liquidity on the lowest volume candle. So definitely different names. But you can see how this is setting up for a potential long right here, where if I don't buy it here and I gotta try it up here, I risk getting shoom. Where this was an opportunity to take advantage of. If I'm right, I can potentially get a break of this downtrend. If I'm wrong, my out is very minimal. So right here, we got 18s on that order. My out this is the 2308 is 10 pennies of risk and risking 0.5% right there. Where my upside move from the same area is 4 to 1 for my breakout. Where this is just where, we probably won't even take trims on this level. We will be trying to hold this for a breakout with the size that we have, not much. But you can see, here's your green move and sideways consolidation. If it does break higher, this is all in all realistic potential. So from 23.18s, we're looking at 14 to 1 risk reward on the trade. So that's the only reason. At the end of the day, risk reward is gonna take the crown, and for this type of setup, it's nice to have it giving you that out. Where even if it rejects this and we end up getting stopped out down here, we felt that we played according to our plan. Tesla absolutely pumping, but you see the wedge pattern that it had panning out. Not counting it out of the question until it comes into play. But I do think this is a very overvalued name, and I would say that there's not too many different ways that I could play this out. We have a descending channel, breaks higher, um, descending channel, probably, and now breaking through that. Nice bull flag consolidation, gapping up over the level. This was a retracement. Oh, you're pretty much right in that last retracement range. I don't know, tough to say. But all in all, Invos catching a bid. This is going to be the big one that we don't have. Man, we could easily be right off that 28.50 would have been an ideal entry, 18%. So we did miss that. BTI, nice strength on the day. Coming into the dividend soon. But all in all, ATHM is going to be the lone name. Maybe Rivian if it can catch a bid. But that's going to call it for the live stream today. Yep, I think that's going to call it for the live stream today, guys. I appreciate everyone who tuned in, and we will see you on the live stream tomorrow. Peace.